Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, let me welcome you all to this full house at the Diplomatic Academy for tonight's lecture, which we organized together with the Austrian Institute for European and Security Studies and with the German-Austrian Länderforum. So thank you very much that we can do this together. But this is an evening which is devoted to one person. You got it already from the invitation. So please welcome Professor Dr. Martin Selmayr. The evening will be moderated, as quite often here at this place, by Dr. Werner Fasslabend. Please welcome Dr. Fasslabend and his wife. In the introduction, it says that I should give an opening speech. Don't expect a speech, a few words I will give, because if we have such a passionate European amongst us, it needs some sort of skeptical remarks, possibly also, a little bit at least. Let me start by, when I say what's next for Europe, the immediate thing is, well, we had elections. The elections have not been good for more Europe. It had not been bad, but not so good for more Europe. And we had the first round of parliamentary elections in France. Again, not so good, actually, for what we expect, at least in France, from Europe. And you may remember how often Emmanuel Macron has been saying since his Sorbonne speech in 2017 that we need to be ambitious. And he always repeated three slogans, actually, that's good for a speaker anyhow. He first said, let us not be divided, so let's stay together. Secondly, he said, let us not be afraid. That's also good for this union. And the third thing is, let us not wait. And I have to say, that was in 2017. Actually, we are waiting for quite a few changes. We are not really divided, but we have many different positions, as we saw it on the law of renaturalization, for example. And don't be afraid, I'm not sure if we have the population, a majority of the population behind us when it's about the war in the Ukraine, the sentence, don't be afraid. That's actually the point that I would mainly like to make. The question is, what's next for Europe? And we always think about the European Union. So let us remember that Europe is more than the European Union. In spite of what the Commission says, in spite of what the Parliament possibly says, but let us not forget that actually quite a large number of European countries are not part of this integration. They are still in the process. And not even all of them are in the process, actually, at the moment of negotiations. I don't have to mention the names of those countries. So I think when we say what's next for Europe, we should also include what's next for those countries which are not part of the European project at this very moment. And sometimes I have the feeling that we are so much centered on our internal huge problems in the structure of the European Union that we sometimes forget about the rest of Europe. The second point is what's next for Europe. That's obvious, and it will be certainly mentioned. We have to defend Europe at this very moment with the Ukrainians. And whatever we think about it, this was the reason why Emmanuel Macron was saying in an Economist interview only recently, Europe can die. What he meant was not that he wants that Europe dies, but he said it can die if we don't defend democracy and liberty in Europe, and not only in the European Union. That's why I say Ukraine. And thirdly, certainly what's next for Europe, possibly Donald Trump is next for Europe. Again, we have to prepare for this possibility, and I'm sure, Martin, you will also talk a little bit about the US elections, what's coming up. And my last point really is, maybe we don't realize that, but at the moment, in all the parts of the structure of the European Union, the big issue is, can we really find a balance between the green transition we all need and the competitiveness that we want as a European continent? That's very difficult, and we've experienced in the last few years less and less concentration on the transition, green transition, and more on the competitiveness. But even there, you may know that the European Council commissioned Mario Draghi to write a report on how Europe can become competitive again. And this report was promised for the last June Council. It's not yet published. You remember what I said about Macron? Let us not wait. So there is a lot that is still open and in the air, and I do have hope that we will find somehow a balance between the green transition and the competitiveness. As I said, I will say a critical word. I can refer to The Economist, weekly magazine, not very sympathetic to the European Union, European integration sometimes. They are quite critical about Brussels especially. And they said Brussels is a machinery, and they suggest all solutions are just about every problem is more Europe. And maybe this is not true. Maybe the Commission is not always saying more Europe. You know the discussion we have in Austria also about this. So what's next for Europe is, I think, a very pertinent issue to discuss. It's good for the beginning of summer because we need reflection on all of this. I hope we have time for this reflection. But tonight we have a passionate European with us. So welcome to Martin Selmayr and welcome to all of you.
Lieber Emil Brix, ladies and gentlemen, also a very hearty welcome from my side. I will say a few words, but before I do that, it's the first time that the Austrian Institute for European and Security Policy is organizing this event together with the Österreichisch-Deutsches Länderforum, and therefore I ask now the president of the forum, Dr. Harald Wögerbauer, to say a few words. Please, Harald.
Ich darf alle recht herzlich begrüßen, bin ganz überrascht, wie voll der Saal ist. Wir haben gute Arbeit geleistet und ein großes Thema gefunden, was alle interessiert. Aber warum ich hier wirklich stehe, ist ein trauriger Anlass. Unsere Vizepräsidentin, die Vizekanzlerin, ist gestorben und wir vermissen sie alle. Sie war nicht ein normales Mitglied von uns. Seit der Gründung 2017 war sie immer tätig für uns, ein Vorstandsmitglied, wie man sich nur wünschen kann. Viele von Ihnen haben sie sicher auch schon kennengelernt. Sie war nicht nur immer passiv tätig, sondern wir haben eine Kooperation mit dem Überseeklub in Hamburg und da hatte ich die Ehre, dass wir einmal einen Österreich-Abend hatten. Ich war Ersatz für den Ex-Bundeskanzler Schröder, weil er hat ein Buch geschrieben über, brauchen wir eine neue Weltpolitik, das habe ich ein bisschen zerrissen. Und die Frau Bundeskanzler war auch dabei und sie war international tätig. Wir waren 4-5 Mal mit ihr draußen. Ich bitte jetzt um eine kurze Schweigeminute. Danke sehr.
Ja, danke, lieber Harald Wögerbauer. Thank you very much, Harald, for your words. I think our first female chancellor certainly was an outstanding personality, and I think it was valuable to think of her today. Thank you very much for that. I also would like to welcome almost everybody here in this room. I will say a few names. Please understand if the list certainly will not be complete, but I start with our former Minister Elisabeth Udolf Strobel. I try to make it pretty short. Please give an applause at the end. Next is Peter Fichtenbauer and Edeltraud Fichtenbauer. Then we have a long list of ambassadors. I'm just looking at my list, and this is certainly not complete, but I see the ambassador of Uruguay, the former ambassadors Christiane Donatus Kök, Peter Moser, Jakub Voss-Batalha, Erwin Kubesch, and also Sebastian Enskat in the first row. He is the director of the Konrad Adenauer Stiftung, and it's a specific pleasure to have you here. I also want to greet heartily the PAN organization, of course not only the diplomats, also the generals like General Weber, but also the members of our board, Ernest Huber and others, and many friends that are usually together with us, like Peter Haider, Georg Krauchenberg, Paul Michaljewicz, Wolfgang Helper, and others. Specific welcome also to the ambassador of Sudan, a country which is in an extremely difficult situation at the moment. And then I just want to go over and welcome all of you very heartily. It's a great pleasure that you are here, and I think you will not regret it, because you certainly will have the privilege tonight to have an outstanding presenter and professor. Because today he is here in his function as a professor, also a little bit as a former Secretary General of EU, and maybe just therefore also a few words to his person and to his career. Yeah, he was born in the Bundesdorf in Bonn, but is Bavarian, studied not only in Passau, but also in Geneva, in King's College, in London, in Berkeley, in the United States, and then had certainly an outstanding career. If you just look, you know, the steps he made, EZB, European Central Bank, but also IMF, then also private industry with Bertelsmann Company, and more or less exactly 20 years ago, then it became EU. He was for quite some time spokesman for the media, learned a lot also because he had his doctorate in law and in not only European law, but also specifically in economic, at the economic side, and insofar we all hope to be able to listen to him today very carefully, because I guess there will be quite some questions. And afterwards he had a very steep career. He was chief of cabinet of Viviane Reding, the former vice president of the European Commission. Afterwards he was chief of cabinet of the president of Commission, Jean-Claude Juncker, and afterwards he became the Secretary General before he had his peak to come here to Vienna. Yeah, we really are happy to have you here. Thank you so much, Martin Selmayr, for coming. Thank you for your engagement. Everybody is waiting for you. Please take the floor.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have to switch this on.
Yeah.
Wait a second. So. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for these very nice introductory words. For a professor, this is too much and unexpected. I'm very happy to be here today at the Diplomatic Academy on the invitation of Werner Fasslabend and Ambassador Brix, and with so many friends. 5 years ago, I came to Vienna. The first person who I met was Brigitte Bierlein. We just spoke about her. She was really an impressive person, a wonderful person, and I learned a lot from her. And the second thing is I was invited to give a speech at the Diplomatic Academy. And when I look around, at the time I was a foreigner, I was new and I didn't know anybody. It's very nice to see that this evening I almost know everybody here in this room. So I'm at home here, I feel at home, and thank you for having made me feel at home in these 5 years in Austria. Austria is not only a wonderful country, it has become a country where my wife and I spent the nicest years of our lives, and therefore you all contributed to that, and of course also the Diplomatic Academy contributed to that. I'm happy to see also some students here. The Diplomatic Academy is the crown jewel of diplomatic education in Central Europe, and it's always a pleasure to be here. And perhaps in the future, when I'm in other diplomatic postings, you will invite me to come again, but that depends, of course, if I deliver an acceptable speech today. Ladies and gentlemen, I speak, of course, in my private capacity as an academic, but of course on the basis of my experience in the European Union. And I was invited to speak about what's next for Europe, and the topic was chosen deliberately because it is, of course, a comprehensive picture, but with the specific occasion that we are right after elections. And I think these elections, we should spend some time on these elections, because I heard, as always, 5 years ago, he would have provoked me today. I know this is part of giving me the possibility to say something about it. But I think about elections, we should not just move on afterwards. We should think and reflect what they mean, and also look a little bit deeper what they mean. So I will try now to get this here working. Yes, it gets working, but it must be somehow be seen somewhere because I have slides. It needs to go somewhere there, but it's not yet there. But technology is challenging in these days because we are still working on the digital transition in the European Union elsewhere. Thank you. This should work. And the rest, yes. Yeah, the rest we can do. Thank you. Yes, that should work. Yeah, perfect. Thank you. And I can switch here.
Left. Go back.
Yes, it works. So, let me speak first of all about elections. Elections, some people, when they speak about elections, I have the impression this is an accident. It's terrible that there are elections. Ladies and gentlemen, I think we shouldn't speak like that about elections. Elections are a wonderful moment in our democracies. They are the peak of democracies. They are the necessary rendezvous with the voter. And therefore, I think politicians may not always like them, but we as citizens should like them. They are the moment of accountability. They are a moment of saying what went right and what didn't go so well. And I'm very glad that we have elections in Europe, both in our member states and at the European Union level. And we don't have them only here. Ladies and gentlemen, you have probably seen this already. 2024 is the year where is an accumulation of elections in Europe. It's the super election year. We have about every second citizen on this planet is voting somewhere. Not all exactly elections as we have them in the European Union, but more or less. Think about India, a very interesting election. And I read many, many negative and pessimistic predictions before. This seems to be, by the way, before elections, people are maximizing negative predictions. And then it went all slightly differently. I personally believe in the power of democracy. I know that democracy is not perfect because we human beings are not perfect, but I think we should be a bit more humble and see elections what they are, the moment where power is limited and where new directions are chosen for the future. And these are the elections in the world. I have listed on the right side all the elections that took place in the European Union, in our member states, around this time of the European Parliament elections, because we should not forget that, ladies and gentlemen. Democracy in the European Union exists at two levels, in our member states and at the European Union level. This is so specific. This is why one could compare policy making in the European Union and democracy to three-dimensional chess. For those who are fans of Star Trek, you may remember that Spock is playing three-dimensional chess. You need to be a Vulcanian to do that. Three-dimensional chess is very difficult because you have at the same time to watch what is happening at several levels. And if you add to that, we have in some countries regions and even local elections which are important. It gets rather complicated, but also very fascinating. So let's not think about elections in Europe in a one-dimensional way. Let's also think, as Ambassador Brix reminded, what's happening in our neighboring countries. There will be elections this year in some countries which will be very influential on Europe, and therefore let's look at them with humility, but also with the required attention. I have some problems here with this one. Perhaps somebody can help me, or otherwise I'll just do it like this. You see. So this is what I wanted to show you. Elections in Europe take place at two different levels, at national level and at European Union level. And why is it three-dimensional chess? Because national elections are determining who sits in the Council of Ministers and in the European Council, and European Parliament elections every 5 years determine who sits in the European Parliament. But decisions in Europe require the two levels of democracy to come together. So don't look only at the European Parliament elections. Don't only look at national elections. If you want to see how European decisions are made, you need to look at both together, and that sometimes is forgotten. That's sometimes forgotten. Who is in government in Europe, ladies and gentlemen? I will come to that in a second. Who, over the last 5 years, was in government? Who were the parties who were forming the government at European Union level? When you looked at some of the election posters in this or that member state, you would not have thought that these were the parties in government. But that is, I think, part of the transparency that we as multipliers, the Diplomatic Academy, and all communiques that we need to bring out again and again. European elections that took place in June, well, we call them European elections, and there are also some common trends that you can identify. What are the themes? So if you look, this is the European Parliament Eurobarometer study, what is the biggest theme was poverty and social exclusion, then came public health, and then came the economy and job creation, and then the EU's defense and security. These were the top four. But ladies and gentlemen, this is already misleading to present it this way, because if you go now at the same, this is the average of all 27 EU member states. So now let's break it down per countries. You have totally different views in different countries. For example, the theme poverty and social exclusion was the main preoccupation on the left in France and in Bulgaria. There it came first, in no other country. Security and defense came in the countries in the middle. You would have expected that, the Baltic states, Poland, and also Germany. And on the right side, you see the only country in Europe where climate change came top. That was Sweden, interesting enough. You also saw this then reflected in the elections. So what I want to show you with that, it's challenging. European elections, probably like Austrian elections, are difficult, because what is interesting for the citizens in Tyrol or Vorarlberg is not the same what is interesting for the people in Vienna, as I have learned over the last 5 years. I hope you agree with me on that one, at least those who are Austrian. And in Europe, I think it is continental-wide, you have the same situation. That makes it difficult to guess and also to interpret results in the proper way, because everybody looks at results from their national perspective. What Ambassador Brix has presented about the view of the European Parliament elections is what everybody in Austria says. That's what everybody says. But you would find in Sweden a totally different view of these European Parliament elections. And I think this is what is so fascinating about Europe. Europe requires you to look beyond your boundaries and to understand what the others are thinking, because this is the beginning of working together in Europe, to understand what the other is thinking, what the other is motivated by. So the European Parliament elections very formalistically are, when we ask what's next for Europe, is what we call the beginning of a new institutional cycle. It's like at national level. After elections, you have a new government coalition, a new government program, and then at the end, new laws. I learned today that it was more than 840 laws that the current Austrian coalition has adopted and brought to the parliament. 840. I hope you can all mention them and know what is in there. So they were working hard. And I think the same will happen at European Union level. We have the European Parliament elections. That's where the new institutional cycle starts. Every 5 years. We do this since 1979. Every 5 years. It was the 9th European Parliament elections. Then the European Parliament is elected. It has now 720 members, 15 more than last time, because we redistributed some of the seats of the United Kingdom, which were still in the European Union when we voted the European Parliament in 2019. You remember, they left only on the 30th of January 2020. The Parliament will have to constitute itself. That will happen in the coming weeks, at the beginning of July. Elect the president, create groups, the same thing that you know from all parliaments. At the same time, as we are a dual democracy, where also the member states are democracies, the key institution of the member state is also very active in these days, and that is the European Council. The European Council is the body where all heads of state or government are sitting. Heads of state or government, because in some countries is the prime minister, chancellor sitting there, in others is the president. one of them has to sit there according to the Constitution. And the European Council, where all member states sit, they decided some years ago that these European Parliament elections, they are too dominant. They take away the attention from what is decided at national level. Therefore, they came up with saying at the very moment that we have European Parliament elections, they adopt a document. I brought it with you. You certainly all read this document already. It's called the Strategic Agenda. If you haven't, read it. Every 5 years, they adopt this unanimously, all heads of state or government. It's rather interesting what is in there, because 5 years later, nobody remembers what they have signed. Huh? I always read this exactly in the European Parliament. 5 years ago, all 27 heads of state or government agreed on the Green Deal. Did you know that? There was not a single green member of the government sitting at the table, because there is no government which has a green prime minister, but they agreed on the Green Deal 5 years ago. They did this, and many other things. They agreed and they implemented that, the digital and the green transition that was implemented. Therefore, it's worth looking into that one, because they have to agree on this unanimously, and they agreed on this last week. It's on the website of the European Council. I can give it to the Diplomatic Academy, that it can, for all those who admit that they haven't read it, they will get it then discreetly from the Secretariat. It's an interesting document, and it is there for member states to show, yes, there are European Parliament elections, but we are also there. We are elected at national level, and the priorities are very important that are coming from us. The next thing that is happening, ladies and gentlemen, we need a new executive at European Union level. At national level, we would call it the government. At European Union level, we call it the Commission. The Commission today is elected by the European Parliament, but again, the dual nature of democracy at European Union level, it has to be proposed by the European Council, by the bosses of the member states. So both have to come together. This is sometimes forgotten. We need both. In Austria, you cannot become chancellor if only you have a majority in the Nationalrat. You need Alexander von der Bellen, whoever is president, to propose you, and then at the end to do the Angelobung. At European Union level, we have not one von der Bellen, we have von der Bellen 27 times, but they have to agree. This is the European Council, is basically a kind of institutionalized multiple von der Bellen. And before, they proposed the president of the European Commission, and the president of the European Commission then has to be elected by the European Parliament. And when the European Commission president candidate, that's how the person is called, goes to the Parliament, they present another document, which you all should read again, because this is the governmental program for the next 5 years. And this is the basis. This is being negotiated with all member states in line with the strategic agenda, with all political groups in the European Parliament, which in the end form the majority to elect the Commission president. And if you read through it, it's like a government program. This is the one for 5 years ago. At the moment, the next one is written, because the new candidate for Commission President will have to be elected, and this is being, at the moment, done. It will be worked on until the night of the election. It will then, in the night of the election, be translated into all languages, because this is a requirement. The European Parliament has the right to get it in all languages, in all 24 languages. It will be translated in the night by very hard-working translators, and then the European Parliament has a debate and either says yes or no to the program and the candidate. So this is what's going to happen in the coming weeks. Once the president is there, we need a new European Commission. The president is only one member of the Commission. We have several members of the Commission. Also, then the whole Commission again has to go through a vote in the European Parliament, including the president. So the president has to be elected even twice by the European Parliament. By the way, I just ask in the room, when you have national elections in Austria, who is no, that you know, that is on the 29th, yeah. But who is electing the chancellor? Who is electing the chancellor? There is no vote in the Nationalrat. Of course, you need to have a majority, otherwise you will be voted out of office, but there is no constitutive vote on the chancellor, as you would have it here and as you have it in many other parliamentary democracies. I'm just saying, sometimes I hear that commission presidents are called, notably British prime ministers love to do this, they called commission presidents unelected bureaucrats. Well, they even elected twice. And by the way, also all members of their team, all commissioners, have to be elected, which ministers in a national government, most of the time in most countries, don't have to be. So there is a stringent link to the European Parliament elections and democracy at European Union level, both to the member states' democracies and to the directly elected European Parliament. Once the Commission is installed, that will happen somewhere towards the end of the year, then the Commission can start to do what the Commission does. The Commission initiates legislation according to this program. What is written in here will then be implemented. So don't say these things just happen out of the air. No, what is in here, and everything what is in here last time was implemented, at least 95% according to the academic analysis of that. And the Green Deal was in there with every comma in it, which is for some surprising that this was the element of vote of the European Parliament and the Council 5 years ago. Ladies and gentlemen, so that's the new institutional cycle that we are starting. And of course, this is what decides this whole at European Union level, the composition of the European Parliament. This is the European Parliament that ended in May. So the Parliament that was there for the last 5 years. So the Parliament that voted this terrible Green Deal and all these things. This was the European Parliament. You see how this Parliament was composed. We had a broad majority, I would say, in the center, but it was more a center-right European Parliament. Does this look to you like a green, aggressive left parliament, what you have here? No, ladies and gentlemen, that was the European Parliament. So please look at that. This was the majority at European Union level, and by the way, in most member states. Now we have the elections, so what has changed? Do you think a big change happened? Well, not a big change. So this is the new parliament. This is the old parliament, this is the new parliament. It jumps a little bit because I'm not so good at PowerPoint, but you see it's just a small change. I think Carl Bildt has done the calculation that the center parties had before 59% and have now 56%, and we don't know yet whether it is. So basically that's why people interpret it as the center holds, but we will have to see more in detail what that means, ladies and gentlemen. Here you see what has shifted. So I think the European People's Party, that is in Austria, the ÖVP, won at European Union level 12 seats in a parliament of 720. That's a small shift. It's a shift, but a small shift. The Socialists and Democrats lost 3. The Conservative and Reformist, these are the Eurosceptic parties in Poland and in Italy, notably, the ECR, this is the PIS in Poland, this is the Fratelli d'Italia of Mrs. Meloni, they won 14 seats, but are at 83 seats. Renew, this is the Liberal Party, in Austria it would be the Neos, the main proponent is Emmanuel Macron, they lost 27 seats, about what they won 5 years ago, so this is basically back to where they were before. Identity Democracy, this is the right-wing extremist, that is notably Le Pen in France, until recently the German AfD, which was expelled by Mrs. Le Pen. They won 9 seats. The Greens lost 17. They are now back where they were 5 years ago. And then we have some on the left and some non-aligned. You have a lot of non-aligned, because the European Parliament, the political groups are very different from country together. Some first have to find their way afterwards. Where do I belong? You have in Germany, for example, Die Familienpartei. Where do they go? They joined last week the EVP. You have the pro-European Volt, which had a strong performance in several countries. In Germany, 3. They decided to join the Greens, which brought the Greens in Germany as the second strongest party in number of seats after the European Parliament elections, with the Christian Democrats being by far number 1. So you see some shifts, but not sensational shifts. Some shifts, as in an election with 720 members, you would expect some shifts after 5 years. But I'm personally surprised. That surprises me, and I'm observing this since a long time. There was not a bigger shift, because if I read the newspapers, I think the end of Europe was near, and the takeover, I don't know, by this or that force was there, but it seems not to have happened. That doesn't mean that things are easy. It becomes more complicated. Here, just look at the colors. These are basically the election results in the different member states. You have on the left side those countries which voted more to the right. The ones that did this most are France and Austria, where the extreme right became first. On the right side, you see the countries where the left or the liberals won, and in the center, you see where the European People's Party, which is the winner of the elections, became the strongest, notably in Germany, which I think also is sometimes forgotten in the media reporting in neighboring countries. So if you look at a country like Belgium or the Netherlands just got in a right-wing government, but in the European Parliament elections, the Green and the left won. So it's not also, this is also, again, Europe is not simple. It's not one solution, it's not one direction, and I personally, as a citizen, I'm happy about this. We don't have the choice between Trump or Biden. we have choices, many choices, and at the end, there is no extreme solution because all this moderates itself. Checks and balances were not invented by us, but they are applied by us because we have this multi-level system. So the fact that there is one party winning everything and is then dominating or discriminating everybody else is not possible in the European Union, is not possible in our parliamentary democracies. We need, when you see this, we need to speak to each other. We need to listen to each other. We need to form coalitions. And this is the art of compromise. This is probably the strength of our continent. And I wish sometimes that we all are a bit more positive about that different political forces have to agree on something, because this means we're not deciding against you. We're not deciding against you and not deciding against you, but we're trying to find solutions that take into account the different interests, even though sometimes this is slow. So if you want fast decisions, this is not a good system. But it's faster in China, and you know, with the outcome of that, perhaps your permit for the road goes faster, but it may go through your garden, and you have no say on that. And that is not the worst that can happen to you in such a situation. Ladies and gentlemen, the first decision that after the European Parliament election has to be taken, where this new system, the art of compromise, is tested, is what we call in Brussels the decision on the top jobs. At national level, the key person to choose is the Chancellor, the Prime Minister. Well, at European Union level, as we are a more complicated system, we have several such top jobs. We have 3 such top jobs. The President of the Commission, the President of the European Council, and somebody who has a very complicated name. I call him or her Europe's Foreign Minister, but this was foreseen in the Constitutional Treaty, then it was rejected, then we had to do the same thing again and call it more complicated because allegedly people wanted it complicated. I never heard somebody who wanted it complicated, but that was the consensus of all heads of state and government. That's why we call it now High Representative for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy and Vice President of the European Commission, in the abbreviation HRVP. You can also call him or her foreign minister, but don't say it too loud. So you have these 3 top jobs that have to be now, by this system of national and European democracy, to be decided on. And how does this work, ladies and gentlemen? First of all, as a lawyer, we always look into the treaty. In the treaty, there is fortunately a declaration attached that you probably know all from national politics. Because it means when you do this, you have to be balanced. And you have to be balanced, here it says, the need to respect the geographic and demographic balance of the European Union and its member states. The demographic and geographic diversity of the European Union and its member states. What does it mean? Well, geographic means they should not all be all from the north, all from the south, all from the west, all from the east. So, like we probably will not have an Austrian government only made up of people from Vorarlberg, even though they are fantastic. We would have somebody from Niederösterreich, for example. I think that's probably logical. And others. At European Union level, you try to have this balance as well. Then demographic diversity. What does this mean? Demographic diversity means the European Union is a union of bigger and smaller member states, but that should not be seen. All of them have a say. So we should see in this final top jobs distributions, bigger and smaller member states, they should both feel represented. It should not be the European Union only of the big guys. In all our institutions, we have this. In the European Parliament, you see that Germany has 96 members of the European Parliament, Austria 20. Well, Austria has fewer, but proportionally to the population of Austria, the vote of a voter in Austria votes twice. That's why I voted in the European Parliament elections in Austria, because you're much more powerful here than when you vote in Germany. But don't tell this. Also, this is on the internet, so careful. So also here in this division of the top jobs, we want to see the demographic balance that the European Union takes bigger and so-called smaller member states equally into account. So how was this done in the past, ladies and gentlemen? The first time this was done after the Treaty of Lisbon, this was the outcome. You had at the time José Manuel Barroso from Portugal, smaller country from the south. You had Herman van Rompuy, Belgium, middle of Europe. And you had Catherine Ashton for the foreign minister, who came from the United Kingdom. You see, we did everything. We gave all the jobs to the British to keep them in the European Union, but it didn't help. But you saw here the attempt to have some balance. You saw also the fact that at least one of the 3 jobs was a woman, which was important in this constellation. At the time, the majorities in member states and at the European Parliament were in the hands of the EPP and the Social Democrats. That's why you have here Herman van Rompuy and José Manuel Barroso were both from the European People's Party, ÖVP in Österreich. And Lady Ashton was, even though she was a lady, she was from the Labour Party in the United Kingdom. So that was at the time the coalition. We had a grand coalition at European Union level that doesn't exist anymore in most member states, as you know yourself. Second time this was done in 2014. We had again a constellation. We had Jean-Claude Juncker from Luxembourg, small country, the heart of Europe, as president of the Commission. We had Donald Tusk from Poland as president of the European Council, big country in the east. And we had Federica Mogherini, big country from the south, and a woman as foreign minister, high representative. Again, I think one could criticize at the time that perhaps not all small countries were represented, but Jean-Claude Juncker incarnated the small countries. So people felt very happy with him because he was famous in European Council meetings that he let everybody speak. And some said, why does he allow also the guy from Cyprus to speak? Well, that's the European Union. Everybody has the right to speak. And Jean-Claude Juncker was very good at that because he also knew everybody gets tired afterwards and votes then for the decision. And we have the current constellation that is now coming to end, 2019-2024, with Ursula von der Leyen from Germany, big country from, I don't know, is it northeast or you judge yourself. We have Charles Michel from Belgium, and we have Josep Borrell from Spain, from the south. Josep Borrell is a socialist, Charles Michel is a liberal, and Ursula von der Leyen is a Christian Democrat. So you see already at the time we needed 3 political families to have it together. This was, if you like, the government coalition of the European Union. Huh? Have you realized this when you looked at the party posters in the elections? You haven't, that these 3 parties were there, because then all the others were only in opposition. I have always the feeling when I look at these election posters, all of them are in opposition, but they were governing. The European People's Party is governing the European Union since 20 years, and I think we don't always hear that. Ladies and gentlemen, how is this happening now? We have now, again, we have to, now after the European Parliament election, a new president of the Commission has to be elected. There's an article in the treaty that says how this works. So there are 3 things that have to happen. You need to have a candidate, somebody has to be ready to do the job. The European Council, that means the heads of state or government, have to propose this candidate with a qualified majority. Qualified majority is not one person can block it, qualified majority. I'll come to what that means in a second. And then has to be elected by the European Parliament. And now comes something very complicated, by a majority of the members of the European Parliament. Not the majority in the room. That means everybody who is not present, everybody who abstains, votes against. This is a challenge. This is a challenge, and you don't have that in many national parliaments. So the European Council is the first step, has to propose. This is the European Council, ladies and gentlemen, and I gave you here an image because of the events in Austria in the last weeks. I thought if you look at the European Council with a magnifying glass, this is how it would look like. I portray here the European Council with the coalition in each government. These are the coalition parties in each government. You see, the longest one is the Belgian one. In Belgium, you have a so-called Vivaldi coalition. You have heard about that. You know the Vivaldi coalition. It's about basically everybody is in this coalition, except very extreme parties. It's all colors. Vivaldi, because of all colors, are in there. Summer, spring, winter, and autumn. So this is what you have. And so now, of course, you could come to a system where you said, we ask all of them, what is your view? And then I think 6 years later, we may have a solution. This is how you don't work at international level. At international level, there's one person sitting there, and this is how the European Council looks like for us in Brussels. The European Council looks like who is the head of state or government. What is happening behind? What kind of letters are written? What is happening in the coalition behind? We cannot care, because if we started to do that, think about Belgium, it would never finish. So one person is authorized to sit at the table, and here you see the colors at the time of the decision 2 weeks ago, 10 days ago, how this looked like. We have at the moment in the European Council 4 Social Democrats. We have 5 or 6, depending. At the time you had still 6 liberals. You have the big majority, 11 or 12, depending how you count, are from the European People's Party. You have 2, the 2 blue ones are from the ECR, that is Meloni, and that is also the Czech Prime Minister who is there. And then you have some who don't know yet really where they are or who have been expelled, like Orban and Fico. We don't know exactly where they are, but they are gray or bright gray. So here we need now a qualified majority for the President of the Commission. So this is not so easy, as you see. What you see already from that, you need probably to come to an agreement with several. Already here you see the art of compromise means you have to speak to several. Because qualified majority in this case is defined as at least 72% of the members of the European Council. For those who cannot do 72% of 27, I can't do this without a pocket calculator. This is 19.6, that means 20. So you need 20 member states of the 27, their head of state or government to say, I want this person. And I need behind them 65% of the population. Another rule that, in this case, to protect the bigger member states, that the smaller member states are not putting the bigger member states outside the majority here, at least not if some of them go together. How do I know which is the population of a member state? Fortunately, they are the rules of procedure of the European Council. I will share the slides with you. What you will see on that one, once a year we update what is the population per country, so that we know how to do the voting, because everybody needs to have this piece of paper in their hands to know. So then you know Austria is 2.02%. Everybody knows this now, thanks to the renaturation law. Everybody knows Austria is 2.02%. That's there. By the way, Austria is on this list of demographic ranking exactly in the middle of the 27 member states. I want never to hear again that Austria is a small country. You have exactly as many countries who are bigger than there are countries who are smaller than Austria. Austria is right in the middle and therefore has also a strong say, as we see in many, many decisions. So that's the majority that you need to get. So you find on the internet a voting calculator, also that everybody has now done thanks to the... I'm so grateful for this renaturation law controversy, because I always looked for a practical case for my law students how to do these voting calculator things. And it never works that it's just 2% that do the trick. And this time it did it, so I'm very grateful for that. So here I simulated for you what happens if the President of the Commission is proposed and all countries who are populist extreme right governments vote against. You see here? So I have basically taken Italy, Hungary, Czechia, and I also took the Netherlands, because while Mark Rutte was still sitting at the table, the government is changing in these days. So if they all voted against the President of the Commission, they would not be able to block the President of the Commission. They would not have majority. I just wanted to say that. So they have not a blocking capability. If, however, in addition to that, one big country, Germany or France, would say no, then this whole thing becomes negative, no majority anymore for the President of the Commission. This means you cannot say, I don't speak to Macron when I choose the President of the Commission. Because you may say, do I need the liberals? Well, they are just 5 or 6. Well, but it's France, it's one of the key members there, so you would not get a majority for the President of the European Council. This is how this works. This is how the sausages are made, which we never want to see, but there's a picture this time of it. So this is the picture which became famous, locally in Italy. Because these were the guys, and it was guys, who did the decision to come to the compromise. Who is sitting around this table? Well, it is 2 representatives of the European People's Party. Donald Tusk, from Poland, he is now Prime Minister of Poland. You have Mitsotakis, the Prime Minister of Greece. They are basically the negotiators for the European People's Party, who you need if you want to have a majority. Then you have Pedro Sanchez and Olaf Scholz, 2 Social Democrats. You need the Social Democrats on board, otherwise you don't have a majority. And you need the Liberals on board. That's why you have here Emmanuel Macron and Mark Rutte, who is still there, the most experienced member of the European Council. So they are sitting together and they need to come up with a package of proposals that they and their political families can support. Who's not happy? You probably saw that. She was not happy at all. She was not happy. Because she went to Brussels, I can understand that, and she was basically not in the room. But she's not part of the government coalition at European Union level. That's why she was outside the room and, of course, was not very happy about this. Like was Viktor Orban and Fico, they were all outside the room because they're not part of the coalition that we need at the end to have a majority. So they have now made a proposal. Ursula von der Leyen was proposed as President of the European Commission. So now we need to look at the European Parliament. In 2 weeks' time, the vote is going to take place. This is the European Parliament, and now everybody in Brussels needs to think how this works. Because this European Parliament, you need in this European Parliament 720 members. You need 361 to have an absolute majority. Everybody knows the figure 361. You have now to work for each and everyone. The European Parliament has political parties, political groups, but They are a bit further away from their bosses. Who is putting them on the list next time? Well, this is not their group leader in Brussels. This is their national party. Huh? If in the Nationalrat you don't vote with your party, well, good luck for being on the list next time. Huh? If here, it's not your party group leader of the Socialists or the EPP who is deciding whether you're there, because this is your national party, so they are freer. Huh? We say that between 10 and 20% of the member of a political group don't vote with their political group. 10 and 20%. So it's a freer parliament, and that means, of course, when you want to organize majority, it becomes a bit more complicated. Now, some people, and notably in Austria, said the whole outcome of the European Parliament means Europe has shifted to the right. I never know where the right really starts. If the German Christian Democrats are also the right, I would not feel this is right, because for me this is the center part. But some probably say that. That would explain that. In January, there was an interesting Pressestunde in the ORF, and I fortunately took a screenshot, that predicted this outcome of the European Parliament elections. And that is probably what influences many people. Huh? Ladies and gentlemen, that means the ECR, this means the Meloni and Kaczynski party, together with the Le Pen party, could have more than 50% of the votes in the European Parliament. Ladies and gentlemen, this is absurd. Of course, everything is possible, but it is outside the likelihood. It was also outside the likelihood before the European Parliament election. But just to do the sake, I have just counted the two political parties together in the European Parliament. They are together at 141 seats of 720 members. They are 220 seats short of the majority, even if they get some Orbanistas and others. So this is certainly not true. So whatever Viktor Orban and others say, this is not true. So let's broaden this a little bit. What would happen if the European People's Party would go together with these two? In my view, totally excluded, because one of the key personalities in the European People's Party is Donald Tusk from Poland. He just won the election in Poland against Kaczynski and his party. So to go together in a coalition with the Kaczynski party, I think, is totally out of the reality. But even if this were the case, a right-wing alliance, as some predicted it, is still 32 seats short of a majority, and certainly if you take away the discipline of 20% not voting together with them, unlikely. Is there anything else possible on the right? So could there be some kind of competitiveness alliance? Competitiveness, a big theme. So the liberals, the Eurosceptics, and the European People's Party. Could that be the case? Again, the Donald Tusk problem should not be underestimated, but also they would not have a majority, apart from the fact that probably the liberals would never go together with the ECR. We still don't have a majority. On the right, there is no majority. You see that. Let's go a bit broader. The so-called Jamaica coalition, as we call this in Germany. So what happens if you take the EPP, the Liberals, and the Green? Also 44 seats short of a majority. Doesn't work. The Grand Coalition, EPP and Social Democrats, 37 seats short of a majority. You see, it is not so easy to get a majority. You go now to the left. The Socialists, the Liberals, the Greens, so the Ampel coalition, as the Germans would say, are 96 seats short of a majority. So also no majority there. And we are already two parties. If I take the left together, the extreme left here, we are still 57 seats short of an absolute majority. So the only way to have now a majority is we do exactly the same coalition that we had this time. The EPP, the Social Democrats, and the Liberals. They together have 399 seats out of the 361, and that means 38 seats above the majority. But it's 38 seats in the European Parliament, where between 10 and 20% may not vote in favor of you. So if you just take away 10%, then you're at 360. It doesn't work anymore with the 361. So that explains while at the moment, all representatives of these three political groups are speaking to other people. This is, by the way, what you do in a democracy. You speak to other people, not to include them necessarily in your coalition, but to vote with them on certain issues, to strengthen democracies, to have common rules. So one possibility is to include the Greens, at least technically, into this coalition. That would broaden the majority to 92, would be more helpful. But as Mr. Brix has said, several people hate the Green Deal and don't like it anymore. So, well, you have to have some questions whether you can hate it so much, because then you don't have a majority there. Or you go to the other side and include the ECR. Then you have also a stable majority of 121, but then many people on the left would say, we don't do that. And also Donald Tusk would say, why should I go together with the Kaczynski brothers? And why should the people in the EPP go together with Meloni? So, ladies and gentlemen, this is difficult. So this is what's going to happen in the coming weeks. I think we will have this coalition here, and we have some attempts to broaden this, at least on themes, on overall orientation, on values, but without broadening the coalition as such. But you see, it will be interesting. Because if the vote doesn't succeed, if we are just at 360 votes, then the European Council has to propose another candidate within 1 month. Cannot propose again the same candidate, has to be another candidate. And I have to say, I put here some names that some media speculating about. We have no clue what would happen then. It will probably be a huge institutional crisis, which is an argument to go for the solution that I have outlined in the best possible way. Some speak about Mario Draghi because people like technicians and technical governments, but Mario Draghi doesn't belong to any political party. And, well, he's still fit, but probably this is how the outcome of the top jobs this time will look like. On the left side, Mr. Costa is already voted and elected by the European Council. He is the president of the European Council for the next 2.5 years. Mr. Costa was the prime minister of Portugal. I have met him several times. He was the prime minister who brought his country out of the financial crisis and consolidated public finances. And he worked together very well with the European Commission and others, and is an interesting person who has worked for a long time in Brussels. So I think he will be somebody who will work on consensus. Ursula von der Leyen, of course, has the experience now, 5 years Commission President, and generally seen also abroad as somebody who represents Europe. And I think also something new, we have now 2 women this time. We have Kaja Kallas. Kaja Kallas is not only Estonian, she's also the prime minister of a country. It's the first time that the prime minister is the foreign minister of the European Union, which is interesting because she has been sitting over the past years in the European Council. She knows how the leaders think, and this is very important for the European foreign minister, who has probably the most difficult job in the world because we have just a very small infant European foreign policy because we need to bring 27 countries together. This worked very well on Russia, Ukraine. There we have one position. As you all know, we have struggling for historical reasons more on the Middle East conflict because member states have a different Zugang to this subject, which probably we should take seriously. But on Russia and Ukraine, we have one common position on unanimity in the European Council, which probably explains why Kaja Kallas, who is somebody who's more on the tougher side of this debate, was chosen now by all member states. This shows that we will not let loose on our Russia policy, on sanctions and other things in the coming years. And this is backed by all 27 member states. Only Mrs. Meloni voted against Mrs. Kallas in the elections. But as you know, we need qualified majority, so this didn't matter. Ladies and gentlemen, there are other top jobs currently being distributed. And I'm just, if somebody is still interested, I think now is the moment. The so-called vice presidents of the Commission. Something that is a bit mysterious. Most people have no clue what this is, but everybody wants to be a vice president. This is interesting. Everybody wants, by the way, a vice president and an important economic portfolio. This is everybody wants the same thing. What are vice presidents? Vice presidents are foreseen in the Treaty on the European Union that the president of the Commission can choose a number of vice presidents. He can choose how many, and he appoints them, vice presidents. And for years, the vice president was just given to people who, well, we thought that they deserve it. There's no additional function was linked to that. The only thing, it's a higher salary. So you gave it to people with a bit more experience, who were prime minister before, or whatever. The first person who changed it was my boss, Jean-Claude Juncker, because he was prime minister of Luxembourg for 19 years. And when he came to the job as commission president, he said, it's rather strange. I have to appoint 26 members of the commission, and I don't have 26 jobs. Because in my government, in Luxembourg, we had 14, 15 ministries, but we didn't have 26, 27. So what do I do with all these other people? So I said, well, that's a good thing. I'm a good manager. I don't want to do everything myself, so I need deputies. Deputies can do my job when I have something else to do. When I'm at a G7 summit, they can chair the commission meeting. When I'm not wanting to go to South Korea, they go for me to South Korea. When there's a trouble between the energy commissioner and the environment commissioner, I send the vice president there first, and then see whether he or she can solve it, and then I see if I'm still needed, because then I don't make everybody my enemy. So it was a kind of managerial decision. So this is how the Commission Vice President looks like. They all had a color here. This was the College of Commissioners, the 7 Vice Presidents, and each of them had a group of commissioners who reported to them. Here, this was the Energy and Climate Commissioner under Juncker. They all reported to him, from digital to whenever there was an energy or climate file, they had to report to him, and they could only make proposals to the Commission, legislative proposals, if the Vice President said yes. Which led to the fact that the office of Jean-Claude Juncker was not so crowded, because they all went to the Vice President, because only when they had gone to the Vice President, they could go to the President. So it was a kind of two-layered system. Ursula von der Leyen has taken over the system, but the European Council, the heads of state and government, complicated that. Because the European Council suddenly decided that they want to appoint vice presidents. So the European Council, here this was the famous decision, and I think a huge mistake, the European Council decided that Ursula von der Leyen will only become Commission President if she appoints Franz Timmermans as Vice President and Margrethe Vestager. Franz Timmermans in charge of the Green Deal and Margrethe Vestager of the digital agenda. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not the job of the European Council. The European Council is not in charge of appointing commissioners and vice presidents. They appoint the president. It's the boss has to decide who works in their team. But it was done, and that made, of course, sure that Ursula von der Leyen could not leave the Commission building, because there were always 2 sitting left and right of her who wanted to have her chair in reality. And she could very difficultly say no to them, at least that's how I visualized them, because they could always refer to this decision of the European Council that appointed them. That's why you had the so-called, they're called executive vice presidents. So we have vice presidents, like in the Juncker Commission, but executive vice president. So today, everybody wants to be an executive vice president. If you read, Mrs. Meloni was very angry, left the European Council. The next day, she said, I want an executive vice president. So this is what you don't get A, then you want an executive vice president. So watch this space, what will happen. At least the European Council this time has not appointed an executive vice president, at least not according to the minutes of the meeting. Ladies and gentlemen, and then come to the commissioners. Because also here in Austria, there will have to be a commissioner chosen at some point, and I wanted to shed a bit of light how this works, because I feel that what is reported about that in public is not exactly in line what is written in the treaties. So this is the Commission. First of all, just recap, how many members does the European Commission have? Does it have to be 27 members? Well, if you read the treaty, the European Commission has only 18 members. 18. That was decided with the Treaty of Lisbon, a very important reform, only 2/3 of the number of member states. But then there was a referendum in Ireland, and the Irish said, we want to keep the Irish commissioner. There was a compromise made. You keep the Irish commissioner for the first 5 years after the Lisbon Treaty. And then the European Council has to decide again. 5 years later, the European Council decided again, even though Emmanuel Macron had said, I give up the French commissioner. Others didn't want to, so we kept all 27. This time again, member states agreed they wanted to keep the 27 commissioner, even though in the treaty it says it's 18. So if you ever complain to us in the Commission that we have too many commissioners, I send you immediately to the national capitals. They can decide this at any moment in time. The European Council can decide to change that because the treaty foresees 18 members of the Commission and not 27. It's only temporary that they are 27, but at the moment, also for this time, they are 27 because member states want this like that. I have to say, I have changed my view on that 15 times, whether it's good to have 27 or not. I think with the system of Juncker, with the vice president, I think it's a workable system. If you give everybody a portfolio, it is not workable. Of course, if you don't have a commissioner from a country, it's not easy how to explain this country that they're somehow, that Brussels is also them, but well, some countries don't know this anyhow because their government doesn't explain it to them. But I think for communication reasons, it has an advantage that there are commissioners in there who are clear and who are also have the possibility to speak to their country themselves. Ladies and gentlemen, the choice of commissioners. The choice of commissioners, how does this work? So here I see sometimes member states choose commissioners. I think probably you all think that Germany chooses the German commissioner, France the French commissioner, Austria the Austrian commissioner, or the Hauptausschuss of the Nationalrat, or even a political party. Ladies and gentlemen, that is not necessarily the case, because the treaty says otherwise. And the treaty is what all 27 member states have agreed. So there's an article in the treaty that says how this works. It says that the council, so all ministers of the member states, by common accord with the president-elect. The president-elect, this is at the moment Ursula von der Leyen, so who has been, not yet, she is the candidate. When she's elected by the European Parliament, she's president-elect. At this moment in time, she can agree with the council who is commissioner of a country, but she has a say. The Commission President must have a say. These are the people who are working for 5 years together with the Commission President. They have to have a say. And I think it's rather important that the person who puts together a team for 5 years knows who's sitting there, can also say no. Huh? I remember my boss at the time, Jean-Claude Juncker, said no to several commissioners who were proposed to him because he said, yes, you don't need this person anymore, but I also don't need this person. Huh? So don't send me somebody you don't need. Huh? I want the best. Or he said from the beginning, from this country, I want this person because I have worked together with this person and I know this person knows the file. So the president of the commission has this say. The member states as well, you have to agree, but also you have to come to an agreement. So you cannot just simply say at a member state, this is the commissioner, take it or leave it. You can do that, but the commission president is not obliged to do this. Notably as today, commission presidents try to put together a balanced commission, so for example, not only a commission where there are only 2 or 3 women in there. So the current commission is fully balanced, as probably most governments today would do it, but that you don't get if everybody sends you a man. So that's why most commission presidents in this process say, send me 2 or 3 people, please. Member states may make suggestions, but it's an agreement with the commission president, and the commission president can interview them on the basis of their qualities. The commission president has also an interest that these are good people because afterwards, these commissioners, designate commissioners, have to go through a vote of consent in the European Parliament together with the commission president. It's now a vote on the whole team. Imagine, you have just accepted whoever is sent to you, and now you go with the whole team and then you go down. That's not in your interest. So the commission president is the person most interested in having a strong team because otherwise the European Parliament will reject the commission and that cannot be in your interest. The vote of consent is very important. The Parliament, before the vote of consent, makes a hearing of each individual commissioner that takes between 2 and 3 hours. And I can tell you, I have seen commissioners designate preparing for that. It's like, I'm a lawyer, I have to do 2 state exams. This is like the 3rd state exam. And you work several weeks on nothing else to prepare that because this is very tough. It's done with the committees in Parliament who are the best experts in the field. So if you are the unhappy person to have been appointed fisheries commissioner, is a very complicated file. These people in the Parliament's fishery committee, they know everything about fish and about blue tuna and red tuna, which you have never heard about, and now you have to learn it. And, or think you are financial services commissioner. All these abbreviations that you have to learn, and some of these people are finance ministers or agriculture ministers before, but this is another level. So you have, and to be asked 3 hours, only you, with no advisors with you, I can tell you, I have seen ministers and prime ministers and foreign ministers and finance ministers sweating in this process. This is how it looks. This is a nice picture. We have several times commissioners were rejected because the Parliament said they were not good enough, they were not European, or they were not strong enough. Ladies and gentlemen, I come to my conclusion. So what is happening now? We have the people somewhere. In mid-July, we have the president of the commission, then we have the College of Commissioners over summer will be put together, then we will have somewhere in the autumn a vote, hearings and the vote on the commission, so somewhere at the end of the year we have the new commission. So how do we come now to the new political directions? Again, I remind you of the 2 documents, the strategic agenda and the political guidelines of the new president of the commission, which are currently being drafted. They both are, of course, influencing each other. Member states have agreed this. This document has to be negotiated with the European Parliament, but the Commission President needs to bring these 2 together because she needs at the end to propose legislation that finds a majority both in the European Parliament and in the Council of Ministers, so she needs to pay attention to both. So what do we see in these documents? They are still in the making. The document of the Member States is ready. So I think you will have guessed that. And Mr. Brix already hinted at what probably is priority number 1 in these times. Priority number 1, and probably we haven't had this as priority number 1 since more than 70 years, is security and defense. Security and defense, logically. We once wanted to be a defense union. Remember in the 1950s, and it didn't work. Now, I think the European Union is really working together. You will see a lot of strong words in the strategic agenda on that. Of course, there's a sentence for Austria and neutral countries that you don't have to participate in that. But I think the rest of the European Union will work together with NATO and make sure that our collective defense is organized in a better way, that we can, if necessary, defend countries in our who are threatened by attacks, whether cyber attacks or in their borders, and that we can also create a European defense industry, because we don't have that at the moment, because we have 27 defense industries, and therefore we are building, each of us, our tanks and guns in our own corner, and none of them really works. This is the reason why we should do this better together, because we spend money on it, and we can spend this money better. The second big term is competitiveness. Mr. Brix already mentioned that. Competitiveness has been written in the strategic agendas of the European Union for the last 20 years. Everybody knows what competitiveness is, but when you ask, do something for competitiveness, most people immediately shy away because everybody understands something different. I think this time I have the feeling this is more serious. I think, first of all, one will look at through everything what has happened over the last years. We had a lot of crises, an energy crisis, a health crisis. A lot of action was done at European Union level together, by the way, with remarkable unity. But now we have to put this all again in a new order. And there are new challenges coming with new member states in front of our door. One of the themes is also making the EU fit for the next enlargement. The next enlargement, many people think this will take many, many years. I personally, this is my personal view, I don't think it will take many, many years. I think there's a strong logic now. And Russia's war against Ukraine has accelerated that. The Western Balkans themselves are accelerating. You need two to tango. They also need to do their reforms. But I have the feeling when I hear reformers from Montenegro, for example, speaking in these days, I think something has clicked. And I think also on our side, the geopolitical needs of this have been understood. That requires, of course, a lot from all of us. The biggest question will be not institutions. Institutions we will manage. Our institutions work better than they are set. The biggest question will be money. We will have to agree on a new financial framework for 7 years. We always do this for 7 years, that we only have to negotiate one. We have to do this in the next 2 to 3 years. And with that, we have already to factor in that the next enlargement will happen, and enlargements always cost money, because enlargement means also bringing countries closer to us. Therefore, I hope that also here at the Diplomatic Academy, you're discussing these aspects, because it's not only the nice diplomatic side of enlargement. Let's be geopolitical one. No, it means also that we have to help these countries to catch up, that we have a European Union where people, companies can work together, that workers can cross the borders, and this works only if we have at least comparable structures, and therefore also financing, at least in the transition years. The farmers will be taken care of, and also the Green Deal, ladies and gentlemen. It's interesting to read this document, what you see here about the Green Deal, because I think some say, we don't need this anymore. Others say we need it even more. I think the heads of state and government have come to a very wise compromise. They have said, we want to be the first climate-neutral continent. We'll continue to do this, what we have started, but we will do this pragmatically, and we will do this in line with fairness and take into account that nobody is left behind. So the social dimension is becoming stronger. So it will be a green transition that will have to continue, but will have to be affordable for all, and perhaps a little bit less ideological would be my personal assessment of that. Ladies and gentlemen, that's the situation. And of course, behind that, we cannot wait, because this is the world outside us. I don't think we have to be afraid, ladies and gentlemen. And I agree here with Emmanuel Macron. I don't think we have to be afraid. We lived through 5 years of Donald Trump, and we managed. For some reason, this brought us closer together. We have at the moment the unique opportunity to have somebody like Joe Biden, who is probably the best friend of Europe in the White House. But perhaps we rely a little bit too much on it. I think for Europe it's time to grow up, and perhaps we need, I hope not, but perhaps we need some external shaking of our own laziness, because we Europeans have become quite comfortable over the last decades. We are the richest continent in the world, the richest continent in the world. We are the continent that can be so lucky that we can help other continents. We have our problems, certainly, but it's worth living on our continent. I show you that as a last slide. Just put together when you compare Europe to China, Russia, and the United States. I'm personally happy that I live in Europe. In Europe, my life expectation is 81.5 years. That's higher than anywhere else in the world. I'm told in Vienna it's the highest. That's why I'm certainly going to retire here one day. Because everybody who retires here gets then afterwards immediately younger. Have you realized this? I think all those who have retired already know that. We are still a very strong part of the world economy, so don't allow anybody to tell you otherwise. Yes, we have our issues, but other continents have also their issues. And in terms of, some say, militarily we are a dwarf. Well, if you put everything together what we have, I think we are rather powerful. We just have to do it together. So I think the most important thing in the next years will be unity, solidarity, working together. We have to compromise, we have to find solutions. We cannot be radical in one or the other direction, otherwise the majority will not hold. And let me conclude with a last word. The elections were interpreted by many, after the first analysis, that the center holds. Ladies and gentlemen, let's not be too complacent about that. The center holds only if all those who are of the parties of the center want the center to hold. And I think this is the critical issue. I find it interesting what's happening now in France ahead of the second round of elections, that there's a kind of democratic consensus between parties who have not so much together, that they withdraw their candidates to make sure that Le Pen doesn't win and get an absolute majority. I find that remarkable. That would be a little bit, I try to compare that with Austria, with the second and third majority is the Neos and the KPÖ, and they would work together. It's a little bit like that. Nothing is comparable in Europe, one by one. But I think you have to jump over your shadow to defend democracy, and perhaps also other people in the world have in the coming months to jump over their shadow, because democracy is worth defending, ladies and gentlemen. This is my last sentence here at the Diplomatic Academy. I believe that we don't do enough for our democracy. And I think democracy is worth standing up for every day, with energy, with passion, because otherwise we will not stabilize the European Union. That's, I think, what Emmanuel Macron meant when he said, a bit too dramatically for my taste, that Europe is dying. I don't think Europe is dying, but we could forget about Europe if we don't invest in it, and we could forget our democracy if we don't invest it and don't cherish it, and like the art of compromise. You can interpret everything what I said today, all these people sit together in different rooms and then they come to compromise. You can, of course, be negative about it. You can, of course, also say, isn't that a miracle that the French and the German and an Austrian and the Slovene and the Finn and the Portuguese sit together and at the end come to a common governmental program, a common team that is at the end elected by the European Parliament and is trying to achieve something in the common European interest. I personally find this a miracle, and I will continue to stand up for that every day, also in the future. Thank you for your interest.
Yeah, lieber Martin Selmayr, thank you so much for your firework. If I should make a personal guess at the moment, I would say, when you were very concentrated, then maybe now you know everything about European Union. If you were not so much concentrated, then maybe you have the impression that you don't know anything about European Union. I would say probably the truth is in between. We have learned a lot tonight. How this crude organization is working. Just an impression, not being able to follow in detail what is really going on and what will be the outcome. And I think it shows very, very clearly how difficult it is to shape out of a bunch of around about 30 countries one union, one political unit. Incredibly difficult. There's just one thing I wanted maybe to bring on the table, as you know. You gave us at the end the picture that, okay, on the whole, the way is okay. We need democracy, we are in a good shape. We are in a good shape. But my impression is that we are losing every day if I compare it with other regions in the world. And therefore, I would say maybe short question from my side with a short answer, impossible to go into details. Are we still competitive in a situation where our car industry is the best way, you know, to lose its importance, when our green technology is not competitive at all, but 70, 80, 90% of all, I don't know, the green technology, whether it is batteries or solar cells or whatever, comes from China. Where do we stand now, and where will you stand in a few years? This is the first question, and afterwards I will ask another one. Please, maybe you can say us a few words.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Fasslabend. I think this is a key question that we all are reflecting on. Huh? Of course, we are a continent where it's worth living on, but we have to make sure that it stays like that. Huh? I would say the doomsdayers are a bit exaggerating, huh? Because this is also part of us Europeans. Huh? Have you ever discussed at the European Forum Alpbach, 2 Europeans, 2 Americans? You know the difference? When we speak about the future, the 2 Americans say, the future is bright, we are the best. The 2 Europeans say, we're in decline, it's the end of Europe. Is this really the case? Do you really have, at the moment, the impression that you prefer to live in America than in Europe? Do you think your health is better protected there than in Vienna? Do you think democracy is more stable in the US? I'm not sure about that. I hope it is more stable, but I'm not sure about that. Competitiveness. Here I sometimes have the impression, with all criticism, and we need to be critical, we have a tendency of self-flagellation. And if you allow me, because I have prepared that, because I knew that this question would become. You didn't tell me, but I knew it would come, because it always comes. It always comes. So, here, this I want to show you. This everybody of you knows. I can go everywhere in Austria. Every industry representative tells me this. Look here, this is Europe. This is our GDP compared to the United States of America. It's going down. We are losing. You all believe that, true? You all believe we are losing. We are. My God, we Europeans are the disaster. Huh? Basis of this is an article in the Financial Times, which with a whole page wrote this, and says the EU economy is 65% of the size of the US economy. That's down from 91% in 2013. So we have lost more than 30% in the last years. This is, you all believe that, huh? Immediately. Catastrophe, this is what we're telling you, outside the deindustrialization of Europe. And ladies and gentlemen, we have to be critical, but that is wrong. Because nobody reads Financial Times articles like I do probably, because it says the EU economy in dollar terms is 65% of the size of the US economy. That's down from 91% in 2013. In dollar terms. So I'm a lawyer, so I don't understand anything about that, but that I understand. About currencies, I understand something. So I know that there's an exchange rate. So I take the exchange rate out, and this is possible. You go on the website of the IMF, it's very easy. So I take the exchange rate. But first of all, in dollar terms, is the euro and the dollar always in the same way? No, they have sometimes we go up, sometimes goes down. This is happening. So what I look at when I look at this chart here, first of all, I prolong it. I prolong it because I remember times where the dollar became weaker to the euro. You also remember that, huh? So this is what I see when I go back to 1970. So sometimes it went up and sometimes it went down. So we only saw the very last end of this, what is there in the Financial Times. The rest is this. I have never read, ladies and gentlemen, that the European economy grew 91% to the US economy, even though probably in some of these cases it was true. In dollar terms, huh? In dollar terms or in euro terms. Huh? So please, ladies and gentlemen, we have to compare apples with apples, huh? And not what we want to hear because it's good for our lobbying purpose. We take away the exchange rate. One says, what does a dollar buy and what does a euro buy? We call this power purchasing parities. Huh? The World Bank can simulate, everybody of you can go on the website of the World Bank and calculate Europe's GDP to the GDP of the US in purchasing power terms, exactly for this period here. And it looks like that. It looks exactly like that, ladies and gentlemen. So please, yes, we have our problems, and the United States has its problem, and we shouldn't belittle them. But please don't tell you that Europe is in inevitable decline, everything goes down the river. This is wrong, and this is exactly what we as Democrats have to fight for the truth of this one. Of course, if you look at the whole picture, this is Europe and the United States of America. We have basically been in parallel, our development of GDP, but we have been progressively, both of us, losing. Both of us, not to Russia. Huh? Here, this is Russia, so don't be afraid of Russia, please. Russia is in a different league. But to China. China is slowly coming up. We are far by being lost. So that's why I just want to say, yes, we have to work on our competitiveness, but not our all car industry is doomed. At the moment, what is the share of Chinese cars, of e-cars on the European market? When I read the newspapers, I have the impression 95%. It's 9%. 9%. How much European? 80%. So please, we have to make sure that it stays like that. We have to make sure that it's not only lithium batteries, but also other batteries. Yes, we have to work on that in innovation, technology, but please, the game is far from lost. It has just started. And I think there's something good what we do in Europe. We're not financing this all only with subsidies, but we're also doing it by technological innovation. So I think in some cases, also on industrial policy, I prefer to be in Europe and not in the United States of America. Sorry for another passionate plea.
Second question with a request to be.
I have nothing else anymore.
Just as.
What happens when you change the currency?
Absolutely. What happens then? When both change the currency, there's no difference.
The exchange rates, this is different, of
Yes.
course, yeah. But you said, for Europe, for the future, security will be priority number one. At the same time, you told us, okay, that there is no common market. Every country is producing its armament itself. Big countries, the biggest ones like Germany, they are able to produce 12 tanks a year. 12 tanks, just imagine, This is maybe the question for, I don't know, a week of fighting in Ukraine. Okay. And, I mean, if you look to the development of the last years, where's the progress? Where will be the future? Will Europe really be able to defend itself, to establish a common defense market, more or less, maybe even a common defense policy? What is your opinion?
I think this is a huge challenge, because we have never done this, and it's the deepest reserve of national sovereignty, defense. But on the other side, we have also a unique opportunity, because as nobody is doing it really in Europe, we don't have thousands of entrenched interests. It's relatively easy, starting from a low level, to work together. So I see it's not that nothing has happened. I remember for the first time we made an analysis in 2017. Until 2017, it was impossible to speak about defense in the European Union because Britain didn't want it. This was very clear, and everybody knew this, so you spoke about defense in NATO, but not inside the European Union. 2017, even though it was in the Lisbon Treaty that we can do that, we can not only talk about it, we have even a defense agency, we can all do that, we can create a permanent structured cooperation in defense matters, so we can build tanks in 5-6 countries together. It was not done until 2017. 2017, very close to here in Bratislava, 27 heads of state and government met for the first time without Britain, even though Britain was still in the Union, but they said, well, they want to leave us, so we have to sit together now and discuss what we do. And one of the first things was to work together on defense. They created together 27 countries. Austria is, by the way, part of it, the so-called Permanent Structured Cooperation on Defense Matters. We are building together today helicopters, we're building together flying laboratories in medical field, in the military medical field, and so on. It's the beginning. We spent together in 2017 less than 10% of defense spending together with one or more other member states. So 90% inside the country. Today, We are at 20%, so we have doubled it, and we want to go to 30%. So there is something happening, but it's slow. Every military expert, and there's some here in the room, will tell you to change a military production line. And we see this at the moment. We want to supply something very simple, artillery ammunition to Ukraine. It's not so complicated to produce artillery ammunition, but you have to have the possibility to do that. The risk has to be shared. The in-time production has to be ordered by the government, and all things we're not used to. So we have to learn a lot. And that's why I said a bit last time when we started to do a bit more on defense when Britain was leaving us and when Trump became US president, because this was exactly the same time. We started because many in Europe feared that Trump would withdraw the American troops from NATO and out of Europe. He didn't do that. There was a lot of talk. During the Trump presidency, the American military engagement in Europe was strengthened, more in Poland than in Germany, because he didn't like the German cars. But I totally understand why, because they were too competitive. But he didn't leave Europe, that one. And I don't think he will do it next time. But what he is doing, Obama said it more politely, Biden says it also more politely, but they all say the same. You cannot expect from us, the Americans, to pay for your security. You are the richest continent in the world. You are in many respects richer than us, the Americans. So please, you have to participate. And I think many countries in Europe are now investing more. The question is not only the amount of money that we spend, also how to do this efficiently. And to get a French and a German defense company to work together, you know this from your own experience, is worthy of a Peace Nobel Prize. But we are working on it.
Okay. Yeah, and my last question, you talked about the new commission, and my question is, if we look at Europe's situation as a global actor, now we know, okay, Russia is an actor, China is an actor, India is a coming actor, there are so many other actors, of course, America. And Emil Brix and I, we had the opportunity to have a meeting together with the new High Representative of EU just a few weeks ago, when nobody knew that she should become it, or almost nobody knew. Okay, highly intelligent, very strong lady, no question about that. But at the other hand, if I ask myself, what will be her influence? If I look at the international landscape, I do not compare foreign minister with the Russian foreign or the American foreign minister, but Turkish politics is more or less present all over the Middle East and Northern Africa and so on. If I look to other countries, even in South America, whether this is Brazil or maybe now also Argentine, okay, something is going on over there, and you have the impression that they influence the world. Where's Europe, and where will Europe stand in maybe 3 or 4 or 5 years?
Again, it depends a lot on us. I think if we just sit there and say it's all terrible and nothing works and we are the worst in the world, then we will not convince the rest of the world that we can achieve something. If you look, however, for example, what's happening in the United Nations in New York, who is coordinating there the key position on international security matters? It's the European Union. And the European Union, with our own delegation, with 27 member states, and including also all our neighboring accession countries, more and more signing up to our statement. So I think over the last months and years, notably on everything that concerns Russia, Ukraine, we were rather influential on that one. I think we are not influential in terms of sending tanks somewhere. That's not what Europe does. We don't have that. We are hardly able to defend ourselves, even though perhaps a bit better than sometimes the pessimist thinks. But we are a force of diplomacy. We're also a force of trade. I'm saying that, and I have said it a number of times already here in the Diplomatic Academy. I know this is controversial in Austria, but if you want to be influential in the world, you have to work on trade. Our strongest effect that we have in Asia is our trade agreement that we have together with Japan, the biggest trade agreement of the world. Nobody speaks about it. Everybody speaks about Mercosur, which is only 1/20th of that. But and by the way, it would be very important if you want in South America to be more influential. But again, then we have to overcome our comfort zone and work with the instruments that we have. The European Union will never be the one who walks around like the sheriff in the world. That's, I think, we have many of our countries have done this too long in their history, and it's good that we have learned from that we now go for the force of diplomacy. But also our diplomacy has to be backed up. It has to be backed up by a strong currency. I think the euro is today a much stronger currency than it was before, by a strong trade position, because at the end of the day, the world is, Donald Trump says it very brutally, but there is one element of truth, and it is transactional. You only work with the European Union not because we have very nice statements that we issue in the United Nations, but because there is something that you can have from the European Union, for example, a good trade relationship. And we can have something from that because it creates us friends in the world, it creates us partners in the world, and it creates us partnerships in the world. How often have I heard here at the Diplomatic Academy, we have to do more with Africa? I wonder how many are ready to really work together with Africa on a great free trade deal with the African Union, as it is as requested from us since a long time, but also make the compromises necessary for that on agriculture. So I think we cannot do this. This is why I'm saying don't separate, please, diplomacy and enlargement from the hard issues, because it is so nice to speak about we want to be nice to everybody in the world, and we want to be friends with everybody, and we want to be influential, but you have to bring something to the table. And in particular for Africa, we should do much more, but that also requires from our side to make compromises and to understand that they have interests, and they have as many interests as our farmers in Tyrol and in other parts of Europe. It's difficult, and it requires political leadership. And that's why, again, I come back to democracy. Democracy doesn't live from people who run after populists, but who show the way and therefore make the populists wonder in which direction they have wrongly turned.
Okay. So I give up, but I would like to ask the question, who thinks he will be able to bring Martin Selmayr into trouble? Ambassador Christiani is the first one.
That must not be the objective.
Okay, here please.
Dear Professor Selmayr, also in future Ambassador Selmayr, and dear Martin. Werner knows that I always like to put some kind of provocative questions. There are 2 points. The first one is a very small technical point. The new composition of the Commission, to what extent does it also reflect on the top jobs in the civil servants? Of course, I know that each commissioner can choose his own cabinet, but what about the directors general and the etc., etc.? The second point is much more important. It's very important or very interesting to see that one of the priorities is making Europe fit for enlargement. This is very different from enlargement period.
Yep.
And if one talks about enlargement, well, of course, the focus is on the Western Balkans. And the provocation I like to start with is, the European Union has pumped a lot of money in this region. It has some of the countries have a political perspective, the others already start the negotiations, etc. But isn't it, I submit, it's almost a mission impossible for the European Union, or a no-win situation? What am I talking about? We know there are many Western Balkan countries, but the most important one is Serbia. It's the focal point, Serbia and the President Vučić. And if one considers the growing influence of Russia and China, China economically, Russia politically, and these countries are torn between the European Union on the one side and Russia and China on the other side. But let's be realistic. The influence of China and Russia are growing by the day. And you just have to look at Vučić and Serbia, etc. Now, aren't we losing this game in the European Union? Because on the one hand, of course, they want to have a European perspective. On the other hand, they are really torn and they are really kind of shackled by this growing Chinese and Russian influence. So the question is, am I too pessimistic? Is it a no-win situation for the European Union, or a mission impossible, or am I wrong? Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe we take another question over there. Here, over here in this row, last row.
Should I stand up? Yes, maybe. Thank you very much, Mr. Selmayr, for these very interesting explanations. I think I'm not able to bring you into any trouble. First, you were my boss without knowing me. I was working in a commission for a while. Now I'm in a council secretariat, but obviously I'm here also as a private person. My name is Christian Krasnik, by the way. I think I would just come back to the competitiveness issue, and I think I thank you very much as well for painting a more rosy picture, because when you are working in the negotiations of certain legislation, and you hear all the data, also from the Commission colleagues, from the impact assessment, sometimes you don't see that rosy pictures all over the place. Obviously, there are certain sectors where we are really struggling. And I'm just still a bit wondering whether you think we are really dynamic enough in our responses to the challenges out there. I mean, I'm thinking about the new technologies, artificial intelligence, and so forth. And obviously, we are very good in taking up regulatory issues, but whether overall we are good enough on innovation, on technology, and also in our ability to accept risks, actually. And institutionally, you were mentioning the strategic agenda, and actually said you were very proud that 95% of the previous strategic agenda was actually delivered. But I just wanted to remind us that we had obviously Corona, we had all the things, so we needed to react. And now I see sometimes we do regulatory issues, we work very hard, and the Commission departments are very proud. But then I think we're just ticking off the box and do not really respond to the things developing out there. And I'm just want to refer to what the Commission President said about now bureaucracy and reporting obligations of companies. I mean, I'm working now on environmental legislation, natural restoration, all the things. I'm in that department in the council. And actually, I can tell you of dozens of regulations where we put some reporting obligations there for companies. And they are actually, they have not even entered into force yet. And now the Commission President tells us he wants to reduce that. And I think there I see a bit of lack of responsiveness, and it's not the smartest way really to do legislation and not the smartest way to react. Sorry for the long comment, but I needed to explain.
Thank you. Yeah, this is also the request I have for the coming questions to be shorter. Maybe you say a few words to the first two questions, because otherwise...
Two very, very good questions. Thank you, Ambassador Cristiani, for your questions. On the Commission staff or senior staff, there is no impact of the top jobs decisions. And I think we in the Commission also defend that. It's the European Union civil service must not be politically appointed. Cabinets, yes, but not the civil service. Of course, this is not always easy because there are interests and the Commission and its president needs to defend the quality of the Commission service. But like in every administration, if you allow somebody else to put people there, then they are not your people anymore, and then they will not work as hard and well as and loyally as you would like them to do. So you would do the Commission a disservice if you would not do that. If you would, you can take some people from the outside, but not because this or that government wants that. What we try to do is that have in the Commission civil service a representative nature compared to the demography of the European Union. So we note if there are not enough Austrians in the Commission anymore, or enough Germans, or enough Luxembourgers, which, however, has also to do with the fact that it's not so easy to convince an Austrian diplomat or civil servant to come to Brussels and to do all the work there and to give up Vienna, which I totally, of course, understand. On enlargement, I think, yes, you are a bit too pessimistic, in my view, but that doesn't surprise you. I think if it was a mission impossible enlargement, then I wonder why the 27 heads of state and government really write so much about this in the strategic agenda, what they haven't done for the last 20 years. Why they put so much emphasis. I think we all have understood that strategically this is a must. Strategically, however, it means also for this region, notably the Western Balkans, to decide. And I think people are very clear, notably with the country you mentioned so prominently, you have to decide. The European Union is, forgive me the comparison, is like marriage. You have to stop flirting at that moment in time when you enter it. I hope I'm not too conservative on that, but we are conservative on that in the European Union. I would say if I see the behavior at the moment of the leader of the country that you mentioned, I have the feeling he has understood this message. I see some interesting signs over the last months in this direction, both on visa matters, but also now on participating in armament deliveries to Ukraine, which is it goes against the interests of the countries you mentioned before. I think we should not belittle ourselves. The European Union has invested a lot of money in the Western Balkans. We are by far the largest, not only donor of money, we are also the largest investor there, by far. China and Russia are nothing compared to that, and the experiences made are not great. Think about Montenegro, its experience with the Chinese loan. So I think we have more to offer, but we have to do this consequentially and also accelerate the enlargement process and help the countries in question, but also make clear, if you want to join us, you cannot join somebody else. This is our family and not another one, and it has a value basis. I'm grateful for the colleague from the Council for these very interesting questions. Thank you for that. I think it's absolutely true. First of all the programs was delivered, but in the middle of that we had COVID and war and so on. So it is rather remarkable, and that also needs us to ask some questions about this. And I think that's what the Commission President is doing. If you reporting obligations are something what are chosen in the European Union's administration and by member states, by the way, all this is supported by member states and by the parliament, as the lesser evil of regulation. You just report. It's just a report. You just send a report. But of course, if you add and add and add reporting, it becomes as burdensome as the regulatory burden itself. And I think here we have to go through all that, because notably for companies who are listed on the stock exchange and for SMEs on the other side, they have several at the same time, which are not necessarily coordinated. I personally believe that this is one of the structural reasons or the effect of this executive vice president situation that the European Council brought us to in 2019. Because you had in the Commission several bosses who implemented without the need to coordinate. I think it is very important, Ursula von der Leyen has said that in her speeches, that we coordinate this better. And perhaps this time we get an executive vice president for better regulation. Better regulation is not sexy. I worked on this for 20 years, but it is very necessary. In every government, in every company, you need to make sure that not 15 people in different departments do different things and do 15 things at the same time. So coordination is very important, and that's what better regulation is about. Not no regulation or deregulation, but having the right one at the right level and not 15 times the same thing. And here, I understand this also here, the strategic agenda mentions this now, and I hope it will be implemented. And for that, we need some very, very strong personalities, because better regulation doesn't make you popular. Have you ever heard somebody got re-elected because he did better regulation or less red tape? No, this is not the case. So we have to make this more sexy, and I hope we will succeed, because this is a very core element of competitiveness.
Okay, we go to the center, and I take, Ministerialrat, and afterwards Krauchenberg and the neighbor, okay? Please be very short.
I'm not sure whether I can be very short. If you insist on being short, I don't put my question at all, because I need 2 minutes. 1 minute should be enough,
I
please.
try to.
Yeah?
I would like to follow.
You can do it, I know it.
Towards the end of your lecture, you commented briefly on the situation in France. And I would like to follow it up. Indeed, this is a situation which is not only important for France, but for the whole of Europe, maybe even beyond Europe. What Macron did on the 9th of June in the evening was a thunderbolt. This dissolution of the parliament was a surprise to everybody. But one thing is important. The whole thing is now the discussion on democracy and legality.
legality is very much important. And this dissolution of the parliament, and I'm not the only one who noticed that, is illegal, because it is not in conformity with what Article 12 of the French Constitution is saying. The French Constitution requests a consultation of 3 personalities, among them the Prime Minister. And Monsieur Attal has clearly said he was not consulted, he was informed. Macron consulted 8 or 10 people, as one can read in the newspapers. So this is illegal. And what do you do with an illegal situation? You go to the Constitutional Court, and this would still be possible till Sunday at least, and ask the Constitutional Court for a statement on the legality of this dissolution. The Constitutional Court could come to the result that this is illegal and stopping the whole thing, and I stop also, and stopping the whole thing. This would be a thunderbolt, but would be a thunderbolt as it was on the 9th of June.
No more details, please. Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, Krauchenberg. Yeah.
Former Commercial Councillor. Thank you very much, Professor Selmayr, for your fantastic, most impressive presentation. I have a short question concerning the supply of raw materials, rare earths, lithium. China was extremely fast, not only organizing the production in its own country, but getting hold in Africa, even in Latin American countries when we still talked about Mercosur. So I just wonder if the Commission could be helpful when the members are willing, because Europe as a whole would be much stronger than the individual countries. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, the neighbor immediately.
Yes, Professor Selmayr, thank you very much for your extremely interesting insights into the subject. My name's Ron Willis. I'm president of the Club of Commercial Councillors in Austria. I'd like to think that everybody here, like myself, certainly wouldn't argue with your proposition that democracy is the best system there is. But there are at least 2 determinants, I would suggest, there are probably more, but 2 important determinants concerning the results of elections. One is the quality of the information that the electors are provided with. And number 2 is the ability, or how well equipped the electors are to analyze that information. If you want me to give you an example to illustrate this, I just give you the word Brexit.
Okay, thank you. Last question, yes, over here.
I can try it like this if it works. I mean, are you okay? Just a
no.
You focused very much on, in your lecture, on the elections to the European Parliament. But recent national elections don't give very much hope for those who hope for the victory of the Ukraine. And like the coming elections, one of them in Austria and the other one in the US, don't give very much hope either. So can you, I know I'm very impressed by your hope, but can you try to show us the way how Europe will face, given the new national composition of politics, how we will face the current geopolitical challenge? Thank you.
Okay, a lot of interesting question. On the question on France, I think let's not lose our way on this one. I think whether or not it was right that President Macron dissolved the parliament, I personally think it was right, because it's the last chance to mobilize before the presidential elections in 2 years. So I think you have to try it now, and let's see. I think the story has to be told when we have reached the end of the story, and that will only happen in a couple of days. I don't think that, even though I'm a lawyer, that there is a legal answer to everything. And I know also the French constitution very well, so I have no doubts at this moment in time, or no reasons to doubt about the legality of that. But you always will find a lawyer who says everything is illegal. That is, in every country, that's the job of lawyers. We write legal opinions, and we have different, and you have 5 lawyers in the room, and we have 7 different opinions. I read on the natural restoration law, I think almost every possible legal opinion was defended or not defended over the last weeks, even though the matter is relatively simple. So I would say the key question is, will at the end of the day, the center in France that cannot hold, according to The Economist, will this somehow find a way to be revitalized? And that's the key question, because you see in France what happens to a country when the center is not there anymore, when the political parties of the center have gone to the extreme and don't exist anymore above the level of 8%. So this is something that should be a matter of concern, and I'm somebody who loves France, but who also will never give up hope in France and in the French people. On raw materials, I think a very, very relevant question. I think what we're doing at the moment, we have 2 things on that. On one is we have the European Union's Raw Materials Act, which is a regulation which is trying to pool our work on raw materials, both inside the European Union. Also, we have raw materials inside the European Union. It's not very popular to say it, but also to do that, and also to team up outside the European Union. And with third countries, we're working on so-called raw materials partnerships. We are concluding one with Canada, one with the United States, and we are trying to do this, of course, with South America, because it is not true that all these raw materials that we need for the digital and green transition are all in China. China is very good in marketing them, but they have only a small percentage of the worldwide assets that are there, and I think we just have to reach out. And therefore, for example, our raw materials partnership with Australia and our trade relationship that we're building in parallel to that is very, very important in this context. Also with the Western Balkans, by the way. Serbia is at the moment working us on something on lithium, what didn't work for a long time. Then the question about elections and hope. Well, first of all, I think before election we should always have hope and also have some trust and faith in the voters. I think you mentioned Brexit. Well, yes, but I think we need also to make sure that people get the information. Multipliers need to reach out. We should not sit simply at home and hope for the best. So my plea for confidence and optimism is not to say, don't do anything. No, to mobilize you, because Brexit would have turned out differently if people had gone and voted, notably the younger generation, what didn't happen. But nothing is irreversible in life, so we will see in a couple of years. Your question was about the elections in the US and national elections. Well, if you look at all the elections that I mentioned, the national elections, they have gone into all different directions. The Polish elections, it's a huge member state of the European Union, has gone after 8 years of one rule, of a semi-authoritarian rule, now into a very positive direction. Donald Tusk is now one of the leaders of the democratic European Union, of our values, and I think this is very positive. That gives me hope. That gives me hope that, yes, in some countries it may go this way, in other countries it may go other way. I would also say many countries where we may have some doubts have seen that the need to be part of the transatlantic community is more important than this or that populist statement made in the election. Think about Italy. We have at the moment, Italy is one of the strongest defender of our unity on Ukraine and vis-à-vis Russia, which probably some people would not have expected. I also think whatever will happen in France, I don't think we have checks and balances in France. The worst outcome would be a cohabitation where the president and the government would argue about the priority in foreign policy, but it would not be that one side could decide and simply pull the plug on everything what we have agreed. This is something, I think, what gives me hope, that even at the United States of America, where the presidential system gives a lot of power to the president, we have some checks and balances. We have a Congress. Yes, we have a Supreme Court who sometimes also decides against the Trump administration, not on values matter, but on foreign policy matters. We have the Congress who has now adopted a new framework that you cannot just simply cancel treaties, as Trump has done it. You remember Iran and the Iran agreement, the Paris agreement, he simply canceled them. He cannot do this anymore. So the American system is a bit more resilient now. So I believe in checks and balances, and I believe that in our democracy, even if one person may win, that we don't approve of, this part of democracy, then there will be others in other levels of government, in the states. Think about what we did together with the United States at state level on climate change after Trump left the Paris Agreement. I think we have now more European Union cooperation with California than we ever had before. So there is something I would ask you and invite you to see. Also, when you speak with other people, not always the worst of all the outcomes, because that's also something what is necessary to explain, to sometimes go through the complexity of our modern world, and not to tell people there is one simple solution. This is the answer of the populace, and we should say, even though it's hard work, that is not the case. There is not one simple solution. It's hard work, it's compromise, it's listening to the others, and the solution that we will work on in democracy will not be the one that will solve all problems until tomorrow, but it will be hard work, it will take time, but that's how it is and how it should work, and I think one can convince people about that if one makes the effort. I think it's a plea for multipliers, politicians, to make the efforts of explanation and shy away from the short answer that Mr. Fasslabend now encourages us to do for good reasons as a moderator, but what we can't do when it is about complicated democratic problems.
Yeah, thank you very much for answering these questions. I'm looking at the clock, and I have to say it's an iron law in our organization, not that such an event should not last longer than 2 hours. Of course, it would be just a further experience to listen to you, but we will have a short program anymore. So far, I really want to thank you so much. It's always just an experience, a personal experience to listen to you. One can learn so much, and especially not to give up and to look where is the positive perspective and stick to it, because we will need it in order to have some progress for the future. Yeah, so far, thank you so much.
Dankeschön. Dankeschön, Herr Fasslabend.
Ja.
Jetzt haben wir uns das Bier verdient.
Ja. Maybe it should be a little preparation for you for future periods.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Vielen Dank. Eine große Freude.
Thank you. I want to thank all the organizers, and I just want to ask now the Secretary General, Ministerialrat Talia Wögerbauer, in order to speak out the invitation for afterwards.
Ladies and gentlemen, I really thank you that you joined this highly, highly interesting event. And I thank you, Martin Selmayr, to give us such an interesting insight of the European Union and its processes. And it gives us a proof that there is still a need to improve our knowledge about the European Union. And I express my hope that also the mass medias will be more careful about their news, what they're spreading around, because only bad news are selling good. And I hope they don't inform us with so-called fake news. I don't like these words, because fake news is always some words of a special person in the United States. But indeed, we have a need to know more about our European Union. Anyway, I think we have now the opportunity to, I hope you stay a little bit longer, and we have now the opportunity to have some food and wine and water and whatever. So I invite you now to a short reception, and you have the opportunity also to ask Martin for more.
And a big applause.